Good morning, everyone. I am live. Excellent. So good morning or good afternoon to you all. I hope you are well and welcome to this workshop today, which is going to be about building apps with the Jamstack. So just to make sure that you can hear me, so if you would like to say hello or something in the chat, I would appreciate it just to see how many people are here and that you can actually hear me. So use the chat panel to let me know if you can hear me. Also, that is going to be the place where I'm going to be keeping an eye on. So I would like you to ask all sorts of questions in the chat panel. Okay, so hopefully you will be able to utilize that. Okay, so excuse me. As I said, the topic that we're going to take a look at is building applications with the Jamstack. Okay, and we're going to talk about what the Jamstack is, how it works, what you can do with it, and some of you may have heard of the Jamstack before, and that's fine. But if you have, then please bear with me because it's going to be a bunch of things that I would like to share with the audience, the part of the audience who has not heard about the Jamstack before. So we're going to go through the basics of the Jamstack as well. So what I ask from you is to be patient in the beginning. Then of course we're going to take a look at an application. So I built an e-commerce app that we're going to take a look at. And since we have about an hour and 30 minutes to talk about all of this, what I'm going to do is I'll walk you through the application itself, and then I will try to highlight some key bits and pieces of that application for you, give you access to the source code as well, and because we don't have sufficient time to go through step by step on how to actually build that application, what I'll do is I'm going to share a link with you to a site where there are multiple video courses about the Jamstack, and one particular video course is actually covering exactly the same stuff. So if you want to go deeper, you want to actually see how this application is built, then you can at any point in time just take a look at that video or the course, because it's a set of videos, and then you'll be able to essentially learn how this application was built. So I'm going to start with a presentation. So let me just click presentation here. And first of all, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I just started speaking. So my name is Tamas. I work as a developer evangelist at a company called Cloudinary, and I also happen to be a Google developer expert in web technologies. If you have any questions about this workshop whatsoever at a later point in time, or you have any doubts about the Jumpstack, or you would like to just talk to me about something, then you see my Twitter handle is on this first slide. So TPIROS is my Twitter handle, so please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'll be more than happy to get back to you on anything and help you if I can. So Jamstack. What is the Jamstack? That is the big question that we're trying to answer here. So I have a description of the Jamstack, which is a Jamstack is an architecture that allows developers to create fast, secure, and dynamic applications using JavaScript, a myriad of APIs, and pre-rendered markup, all served on edge servers. Now, in this statement, there are quite a lot of essential information hidden. Well, it's not really hidden, it's there, but it's essentially, there are a lot of things that indicate that we are in the Jamstack world. So first of all, a Jamstack is an architecture. Okay, so it is essentially an architecture that allows us to create something that is fast, secure, and dynamic. So all our applications should adhere to those. So they should be fast, secure, and dynamic. Then we can use JavaScript, we can use APIs, and we can use something that is called a pre-rendered markup. Okay, and it's very important that it's pre-rendered or pre-built markup that we're talking about here. And the last key bit here is that a Jamstack site runs on edge servers. Okay, so for those of you who are not really familiar with what an edge server is and what an origin server is, I'm sorry. essentially an origin server in your classic LAMP application stack. That is the Linux Apache combination, right? That's your origin server. It's a web server of some sort. And if you know how web servers work, which I'm sure you do, you type something into your browser, you make a request to access the site. So you make the request to the origin server. The origin server is then going to accept that request, prepare the response, and then send that response back to you. Okay, so basically, when you think about a traditional web server, traditional web architecture, you have this request and response cycle, but between those, you have some action that happens on request time. So for example, you request a page, as I said, you have some code sitting on the server. That code could go and run a database query, populate a template, and then send that back as a response. So remember that in origin server world, things happen at request time. When it comes to the Jumpstack, that's not the case, because we had clearly talked about something that's called an edge server here. So what is an edge server? An edge server is basically, if you use a CDN before, so if you use something like a jQuery or a Bootstrap and you put that into your HTML, and it started with something like, cdn.bootstrap. or cdn.jQuery or something similar, then you used essentially an edge server before. So a CDN server, as we all know, is a globally distributed set of servers that are serving content to the requesting parties from the location that is closest to the requesting party. Okay, so an edge server is just a global set of networks, a global set of CDNs, where you have some static assets that you can request. So if I'm in London, then I get the JavaScript framework that I'm opted in to use from a server that's close to London. If I'm in, say, Singapore, then the data gets returned to me from a data center close to my location that is close to Singapore somewhere. Okay, now there are some obvious benefits to using these edge servers, because there's no sort of server-side work happening. You have some static assets there. Also, the fact that these servers are globally distributed also means that load balancing is done automatically. So you don't know how a CDN works, right? You just request for the data that you need, and you just get it back. What goes behind the scenes is completely transparent to you. So for now, just remember that a Jumpstack application is truly a Jumpstack application if you are running it on what is called an edge server. And then all these other properties are things that we're going to be talking about. And in fact, we're going to talk about JavaScript first. So Jumpstack, the gem bit from Jumpstack is, of course, JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And that's why I have those highlighted in here. So we have JavaScript, we have APIs, and then we have pre-rendered markup. So that's the gem from the Jamstack. So let's first talk about JavaScript, which is, of course, the J in the jam. So JavaScript is, of course, everywhere on the web today. And what you are using it for in a Jamstack application is usually for fetching data, so for data fetch, for enabling interactivity, for various components on the site, to handle dynamic events, and to do something that is called a progressive enhancement. Okay, this is going to become hopefully more clear when we get to that. But essentially, you can think of this as having essentially a page created using the Jamstack, or an entire site created using the Jamstack, and then you add JavaScript to it, where you can do a data fetch, where you can grab data from a third-party service, for example, and using that service, you can then progressively enhance your application. You can make it sort of better for users who are asking for that progression. Then we have APIs, right? So this is the second sort of key pillar to what is the Jamstack. Okay, so the A is for APIs, and I have two quotes here. The first one I came up with, the second one I didn't. So hopefully you heard the second quote before. So there's an API for that, and standing on the shoulders of giants. So why do I have these sort of two quotes up here? And how are these related to the Jamstack? And what was the meaning of this? So I don't know how many of you remember, probably this is 2010-ish, when I think the second or third iPhone came out. And Apple actually had an advert that was running on, I think it was only in the US television, whereby they said, there's an app for that. That was basically the sort of punchline of the TV advert. There's an app for that. And the reason why they said that was because that was back in the day when the App Store, the Apple App Store, was really popular. There was a lot of apps available. I mean, there's probably 10 times more apps available today, but still back in the day, it was like a lot of applications available. And people just said, you want to do something, probably there's an app for that, right? You could just download the app on an iPhone and then do whatever you wanted. And in the same way, this is what I'm saying, there's an API for that. So in today's modern web ecosystem, in what we use today on the web, there are a lot of APIs that are available for us that we can use. And using an API has a lot of benefits, which I will get into in a moment. But think about something that you want to achieve inside your web application. For example, you would like to do payments, right? So there's Stripe and there's PayPal. You would like to do authentication inside your web app. Well, there's Auth0. You would like to manage your images and videos. There's Cloudinary. You would like to send emails. There's MailChimp. There's FormSpree. There's a lot of other companies. So no matter what you want to do, or what sort of functionality you want to add to your web application, it's very likely that there's going to be an API for that. And then the second quote is also related to this, which is standing on the shoulders of giants. So what does that mean? I think that was like maybe a saying from Google, or I'm not entirely sure where it comes from, but basically what that means is you have all these API providers. API providers usually give you an SDK or an API, something that you can consume, something that you can add to your application. And so these companies do one single thing, right? So going back to the previous examples, PayPal and Stripe only do payments. Auth0 only does authentication. Cloudinary only deals with media assets that are available online. FormSpree only deals with online forms and messaging. So standing on the shoulders of giants means that you can utilize all the SDKs from all these companies and you get all the additional benefits. These companies are domain experts in their own fields. This is they have a core product. That's what they work on 24/7. So, when it comes to authentication, for example, you need to remember a lot of things, right? You need to remember how to store the passwords and usernames securely, and how to, manage that. And it's difficult, right? Auth0 is the company that does that. And the only thing they do is related to authentication. So you can stand on the shoulders of giants, you can leverage their services, you can leverage their expertise, and just use the SDKs that they provide. And the other added benefit is that you don't need to manage the infrastructure behind all of this, because they manage that for you. So for example, let's say you build an e-commerce website, okay? And then you've said, okay, in this website, you tested it and you said, you know what, I'm going to get 100 visitors per day and maybe 100 purchases per day, okay? And then your whole infrastructure is built around this and it's going to just work. And then Christmas comes, or some festive season comes, and then suddenly you now have 10,000 people visiting your site and trying, 10,000 people and 10,000 purchases are trying to happen. Your infrastructure needs to be restructured. But when you have an application with Jumpstack, and we're going to get to that a bit as well, but if you have an application that uses SDKs and APIs from other companies, those companies, based on the load that they have to work with, auto scale. So they scale up and down automatically based on the number of requests that are arriving to them. And that is completely transparent to us. I don't know what Auth0, or I don't know what Stripe is doing behind the scenes to making sure that they equally handle the 10,000 transactions that I'm trying to run per day versus the 100 that I used to do. So that's another added benefit. And I also put serverless functions in here because that is a concept that comes up in the Jamstack as well quite often. We talked about APIs and SDKs and all these companies, which is great, but what if you have a need to consume an SDK which is sort of custom? Like there's no company that does that. So you have to either create it or you created it in the past so that you need to somehow consume that information. So in that case, you need to use serverless functions. The reason why you need to use serverless functions is because we just established in the previous statement right here that a Jamstack app runs on edge servers. So there's no origin server. There's no way to execute server-side code in a Jamstack application. Okay, so when the Jamstack application is created and is consumed, it doesn't have a server-side environment. So that's why if you want to run some SDK that needs some server-side environment for it to execute, you need to utilize what is called a serverless function. Okay, so serverless function, for those of you not familiar with the term, is really just a function that you deploy on a provider's website. So someone like a Google function, Google Cloud Functions is a place where you can put serverless functions. There's also AWS Lambda, there's Azure Functions, which is Microsoft Functions. So you just basically deploy a single individual function with some functionality to the cloud somewhere, and then you get a sort of endpoint, or you get a URL which you access, and if you access that, your function is going to run remotely, and then the data will get passed back to you inside your application. And hopefully now you see that if you have this setup, that's why I had data fetch for the J in the Jamstack, because with client-side JavaScript, you can access these serverless functions and you can consume the results just by using JavaScript. And then the third core component that we have is markup. Okay, markup or pre-rendered markup. So that's the M in the Jamstack. Now, basically, when it comes to the Jamstack, it's very important to remember that everything happens at build time. Okay, so we have the traditional web architecture, the web server setup. In that world, 95% of the cases, stuff happens at request time. I request a page, the server does something, gathers the data, runs some SQL queries, puts all that together, sends it back to me. Okay, that's how it works. That's a request-based environment. With the Jamstack, we have a markup rendering at build time. So that means that ahead of time, my entire application is built. Once it's built, I can then deploy it to any hosting provider that I want. Why? Because at build time, we build all the static pages, all the pages that my application is going to have, and I just have HTML files, CSS files, and JavaScript files. There's no need for me to have a server-side environment, a place where I can execute server-side code. Okay, so you need to render markup at build time when it comes to the Jamstack. You can then deploy it to literally any hosting provider that you want, and you can access your site from anywhere that you want, right? Especially if you, and we're going to talk about these providers towards the end, especially if you're going to deploy your application to the likes of Netlify or Vercel, who have a global CDN network available, a global set of edge servers. They automatically push or automatically publish your site to this global CDN, and it's accessible anywhere. So you have your site ready. But what matters is that the markup bit is important because you need to render your markup. You need to create your markup at build time. Okay, request time versus build time. So just remember this. Excuse me. Now, it's usually at this point when people stop me and ask me, because I confuse them, and they say, you just said JavaScript APIs and markup. Now you have some markup. So how do we render that markup? Do you use JavaScript to render that markup, or what's happening here? So there are JavaScript-based static site generators, and there are non-JavaScript-based static site generators. And by static site generators, I mean a tool, some sort of a tool that will, if I go back here, that will render our markup at the build time. Okay, so that is a very vague description of what a static site generator is. So the sole purpose of a static site generator is to render some static pages based on our logic. And there are JavaScript-based ones, and there are non-JavaScript-based ones. But what matters is that, if you come across, say, Hugo, okay, Hugo is a Go-based static site generator, and Hugo as a static site generator is very sort of popular in the Jumpstack community. And people often get confused and they say, well, I thought Jamstack is JavaScript, APIs, and markup. So why are you now talking about something that is based on Go? And it's important to remember that the static site generators are related to the markup bit, so the M bit of the Jamstack, not the J, because how you generate your markup, or what tool, what technology, what programming language you use to generate your markup is irrelevant. What matters is that the end result should be a set of static pages, and then you use JavaScript for something else. Okay. As part of this workshop, we will talk about Gatsby, which is a React-based static site generator. But just to give you the whole picture, there are a lot of static site generators out there. Okay, so there's Next.js and Gatsby. Both of these are based on React. There's Scully, which is based on Angular. There's Nuxt.js, there's Gritsum. Those are based on Vue.js. Then you have something that is called 11t, which is not based on any of these popular front-end frameworks. 11t is just a 100% vanilla JavaScript static site generator, JavaScript-based static site generator. Then we have Hugo, as I mentioned, which is a Go-based static site generator. Then we have Jekyll, which is a Ruby-based static site generator. I also know of Nift, which is a C++-based static site generator. So there's a lot of them. And as I said, as part of this workshop, we're going to be from a static site generator to an open source framework. Okay, so Gatsby is a React-based open source framework. And one of the added benefits of using a static site generator that is based on a framework that you already know, so like Gatsby based on React and the Nuxt based on Vue and Scully based on Angular, is the fact that you can just use your already existing knowledge. So you can use your components, you can use your, the React libraries that you're familiar with. You can just create components, create pages, work in an environment that you're already familiar with. And then these sort of static site generators like Gatsby, they sort of enhance the entire experience for you. So for example, Gatsby has built-in GraphQL queries available for you, where you can query, the files that it uses. It can query additional data sources. So it basically has GraphQL baked into it. And then basically, and you're going to see this in just a moment, is you create your components, you create your application. Essentially, you basically create a React application, and then using Gatsby, you just generate static pages from essentially your React app. Okay, so that's what Gatsby is doing. It has a lot of features. As I said, we probably won't have time to go through it all. What I'll do is I'm going to create a very simple Gatsby application for you so that you see how it works, and then I'm going to jump into this, the large example, the main example that I've created, and then just go through that with you as well. But as I said, don't worry if something doesn't make sense or you think this is too fast, which by default is going to be too fast, I'm afraid, because of the time constraints that we have. I'm going to give you a link to a resource which you can then take a look at your own pace and just go through it again, go through it in more depth, in more detail, and just learn more about Gatsby. As part of the final project, we're going to be using some additional tools as well. So because we're building a Jumpstack site, we already know that we're going to be using Gatsby. So that's the sort of M and J that we're going to use. So we're going to use Gatsby for, its JavaScript purposes, and we're going to use it for the M, for the markup, to generate the final markup. And we're going to be using two APIs. I'm going to show you two APIs in the final product, or in the final app even. One is going to be Cloudinary, which, as I said, is a company that I work for. So at Cloudinary, what we do, we manage your media assets in the cloud. Okay, so media assets being your images and your videos, and then we help you to optimize, transform, and deliver those. Okay, and we have a lot of SDKs. And because one of the SDKs that we have is a React SDK, it means you can very easily just use that with Gatsby, for example, right? Because Gatsby uses React as well. So there's nothing stopping you from using a React-based SDK in Gatsby as well. On top of that, we have a lot of additional SDKs, but I'm going to demo what we do inside the application so that you see what Cloudinary can do for you and how that's relevant to the Jamstack as well. And then the other service, or the other sort of company that we're going to be using, is Snipcart. So as I said, or I don't remember if I actually said this before, but we're going to be building an e-commerce website. Okay, Snipcart is a company that provides you with a full-blown e-commerce checkout flow and the management of that flow. Okay, all you need to do is drop in the JavaScript and the CSS files that they give you, and you can just have really a full-blown e-commerce checkout solution ready for you. And again, the beauty of this is that you basically use an SDK, and if your application now gets a lot of additional requests, Snipcart and Cloudinary and all these providers will handle the data load for you. You don't know how they do it, how Cloudinary does it. What matters is that it will just work. Okay, so in the case of Snipcart, there's a very interesting and very nice configuration options that you can enable via the dashboard. And basically, you have this centralized interface whereby you keep on changing settings inside the dashboard, and then that's going to be reflected immediately inside your application. Okay, so you don't need to manage any e-commerce software. All you need is to know how the Snipcart dashboard works, what configuration options they have there, and based on that, you can just manage an entire checkout flow for a potential e-commerce site that you're building. Now, there are additional benefits to the Jamstack as well. So hopefully you get this idea of what's happening here. We generate some static pages ahead of time. We sort of enhance them with JavaScript and APIs, and then we put them on a CDN so they are fast and secure. But there's additional benefits. So first of all, CDN deployment. You deploy these on the edge server, so there's auto scaling. I mentioned it before that all these CDN servers, all these edge servers, scale up and down automatically. They do load balancing automatically. We don't need to worry about doing any of that, right? It's 100% done in a transparent way to us, so we don't need to concern ourselves with that. There's security. If you think about a traditional application, like a traditional LAMP application, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, usually you have a web server, then a web or an application server, then you have a database server. So now you have a connection between the two places. So what the industry call this is your attack surface area is large. What is an attack surface area? An attack surface area is basically points where your system can be attacked. So in this case of a Jamstack, I can execute malicious server-side code. I can execute malicious SQL queries via SQL injection. I can attack the network connection between the web server and the database server. And I can do a lot of additional things. Whereas the attack surface area of a Jamstack site is much, much smaller. Why? First of all, we don't have a serverless execution environment, right? There's no way that I can execute server-side code if I don't have server-side code environment. I don't have a place to execute that. I can't do SQL injection because most of the time I'm not running SQL queries live as part of my application. There's no way that I can just do a SQL injection in there, right? So all of these things all lead to the fact that the Jumpstack site is by default going to be secure. APIs have auto-scaling as well. I think I mentioned that. And believe it or not, it's really, really easy to deploy a Jumpstack site. There are all these providers out there like Netlify, Vercel, AWS Amplify. I think also, like Firebase hosting is one of those where you can just very easily deploy something. And then if you want, you can just roll back any changes. And again, the deployment providers take care of everything for us. All we need to do is make sure that our app works, deploy that, and then they invalidate the global CDN cache. They push the latest version of the site to all the CDNs globally. So they do that automatically for us. And it's going to be something that I will demo for you as well shortly. In fact, shortly is right now. So we're going to go through a sort of demo and a walkthrough of an application. First, I'm going to build a very simple app for you. And then I'm going to sort of take the final e-commerce app that I built, and I'm going to show you some key highlights from that in the next hour or so. Right, so in light of that, just give me a moment until I bring up the right screens here. Not that. Let me start with a blank terminal and make it super large so that you can see it. Hopefully this is visible to everyone. And what I'm going to do is, just create a Gatsby application, okay? A very simple one. Excuse me. Right, so let's make it a bit larger. Okay, so I'm in a folder on my computer. Right here, actually. Let me go to my development folder and let me go to the culinary workshops GDG Doha folder. Okay, so what I'm going to do is what I didn't tell you is, of course, I'm sorry, Gatsby has a command line tool which I've already installed. It is called Gatsby Cli, which, if you're familiar with npm or you use yarn, you know that you can install via npm install -g Gatsby Cli. Okay, so I've already done this because I've created quite a few Gatsby applications, so this is already done. And what you can do with the Gatsby Cli is quite a few things. Let me just show you what it can do. If I just run Gatsby, it's going to bring up all the options that we have. And I want to show you a few commands that are, I find those kind of important. So there's Gatsby Develop. Okay, so Gatsby Develop will allow you to start a development server, and then you can just go ahead and do pod reloads and other things that will allow you to have a very good development experience, so developer experience even. Then there's Gatsby Build, which will allow you to build your final Gatsby project. So this is the one that is actually going to create that entire static website for us. They also have a REPL. They have some telemetry and some other things. But probably if you will use Gatsby, you will also use this Gatsby New, which has two options: root path and starter. Okay, so root path is the folder on your file system where you want to start a new Gatsby project. Excuse me. And then starter could be a link to a Gatsby project on GitHub. Okay, and they provide you with one Hello World sample, okay, which we're going to be using as well. So basically, if I want to get started, I will do Gatsby New, and I'm going to say that's the site, that's the folder. It doesn't exist, it will automatically get created for us. Oopsie. Oh, what did I do? I just need to copy the. Okay, let's do this again. So Gatsby new test. What did I call it? Test project, and then the link to a GitHub repository that contains a very basic Gatsby project. As you can see, this is from the team behind Gatsby. Okay, so I'm just going to hit enter. You will see, a Git clone, a yarn, or an npm install if you don't have yarn, but basically all the necessary packages are now going to be installed for this particular project. Once that's done, we can just cd into the test project folder, and I'm going to show you the structure of that folder and the files that you can find in there. We're going to make some changes just to, set the scene for you, to show you this environment, and then we're going to take a look at the larger app. Okay, so the installation is going to take some time. Quite a few packages that get installed. So we need to be patient with this a little bit. I guess if there's any questions so far, I'm happy to take any of those now while we wait for a minute or so for this installation to complete. Hopefully everything made sense that we're talking about so far. And yeah, this installation is going to take definitely a minute. So what I want to do is, in the meantime, what we can do is open my code editor and just get ready for me to show this application for you. I'm typing on another screen now, so just bear with me for 1 second until I open the editor. Okay, so editor is now open. And even though this is still, installing the dependencies, I can show you the files and folders that we have here. Let me change the theme here as well for you. I got to learn that I think the light theme works better if I'm doing these online streams. So hopefully this is, the font size is good that you can read what's on my screen. So there are a few important files and folders in here that you need to be aware of. And of course, I'm going to start with the source folder. Okay, so the source folder currently has a pages folder, and the pages folder has an index.js file. Okay, if I open that index.js file, what I have is just the simplest React component that you've probably seen in your life. Okay, so it has an import React from React and an export default function home, which just returns a div that says hello world. And this is, as I said, inside the sources folder, there's a pages folder. Okay, now what's important here is that the pages folder is going to be driving the routing for our application. So basically, pages index represents the main entry point to our application. Okay, so this is the sort of index file that we have. If I create another file inside the pages folder, that is going to be equal to another root. So if I do a new file in here and I do about.js, and I just copy this entire content, and I'm just going to say this should be about, and then hello about page. And just save this. This is going to be another root added to my application. If I create a folder inside Pages and call that test, and in there I create an index.js, and I copy this again, and I say this is the test home, hello world from test home. Save it. This is going to be a root where I have the root of my application /test and /index, right? So this is going to be loaded when I go to that particular path. So let's see, the installation is still going. So we still can't see this, but we're going to get back to this. So remember, Pages folder drives how the routing of the app works. One of the most important, if not, it's probably the most important file in any Gatsby project is Gatsby Config Js. Okay, Gatsby Config is basically the place where you configure anything and everything about Gatsby. Okay, so you know what data sources you want to use, or what plugins you want to add to Gatsby, or how you want Gatsby to do something. That is all driven by this gatsby-config.js file. Okay, so this is your main file that you're going to be using. Also take a look here that it has plugins. Okay, this is the only thing that the config file adds. Of course, there are other properties that you can add to this exports object, but by default, we have plugins in here. So that's very interesting because Gatsby has a very vast plugin system. So it can utilize plugins. And in fact, let me show this to you. So if I go to new window, I'm going to search for Gatsby plugins. You see that I'm on the official Gatsby website. And as of today, there are 2,389 plugins available. And what's great about the Gatsby plugin system is that some of these plugins are actually official plugins. They're considered to be official plugins because the Gatsby, the team behind Gatsby, the team who's developing Gatsby, releases plugins as well. So there are some official plugins, but you can also create your own plugins. So there are a lot of, in fact, the majority of these plugins, of these 2,400 plugins, are based on the community. They are community plugins. So developers thought it would be a nice addition to add to Gatsby, and then they created a plugin for it. So for example, analytics. If I want to add any sort of analytics to my Gatsby project, I can use any of these analytic plugins like Matomo, Mixpanel. There's also Google Analytic Track Links. There's Gatsby Plugin Analytics. All sorts of analytic plugins that I can use. If I want to use something like offline features, there is Gatsby Plugin Offline. So this is going to enable a progressive web application support for my app, and it's going to allow me to create an application that will also work offline. So when I don't have network connectivity, it will work. Okay, so there's lots of plugins that you can choose from. As I said, some are official, like this one. Some are, community based, and I don't know how to find those, but it's right here. So once you decide on using one of the plugins, you can come to this page and you have a very nice and thorough documentation about the plugin itself. Okay, so first of all, they tell you what you need to do to install the plugin. So you just execute this npm install or yarn add command if you're using yarn. Then you have how to use, right? So inside the plugins array, you just specify the name of the plugin. And there are two ways to do this, but I'm not going to get into the details, but there's two ways of doing it. You specify the name of the plugin, and you specify all the options that you want to enable for the plugin. If you're not sure what the options are for the plugin, you scroll down and you take a look at the options section of the documentation, and this is where you will find all the available options for this particular plugin. Okay, so if I do Google Analytics, for example, Gatsby plugin Google Analytics, this is how you install it. You add that to the plugins array, you add your tracking ID, and then these are all the options that you can specify, right? It's all added here. Tracking ID, head, anonymize. You know, if you know analytics, then you know what these fields mean. There are optional flags. Here's a full-blown example, and that's pretty much it, right? Very, very easy to use. And as I said, you have 2,400 such plugins, so it is truly a plugin for something that you want to use in the Gatsby on the Gatsby site. Okay, so this is now complete. We can cd into this folder. Actually, I've already done that. I'm sorry, it's right here. So let's actually try this out now, shall we? So let's see. Code test project. Let's open that in. So what we can do now, we can actually go ahead and run this. So how do I run it? Remember, we had Gatsby develop. Gatsby develop will create a test HTTP server for us. Is going to enable things like hot module reloads and other things, which is going to be very good for our development experience, developer experience. And I'm also going to open a browser where this thing is working behind the scenes here, so that we can take a look at what's happening. Hello. There we go. Okay, so Gatsby is building the page. It has a few, actions that it needs to take. The last one is building development bundle. Once it has finished building the development bundle, it's going to say that this is now available on localhost 8000. Okay, so if we go to localhost 8000, then we have our first Gatsby application, which just says hello world. Okay, if I remember, go to /about, then I get the hello about page, right? Remember, we had this routing set up, and if I go to /test, then I get hello world from test home, and if I create an about.js under the test folder, I'm creating it here, so this is test about and hello world from tests out. And I'm just going to save. I don't need to touch this Gatsby process. It's just going to restart. So now if I go to /test/about, /test/about, probably there's a typo that I'm not seeing here. But let's just restart this Gatsby project. That usually helps as well. The thing is that the developers behind Gatsby made a really good job on letting us know when we need to restart the Gatsby develop process and when we don't need to restart it. Every now and then, there's going to be some weird things that means you need to manually restart it. But generally speaking, it works really well. Okay, so this is the Hello World test about page. Okay, so this is now configured inside the routing here. Now, let me show you something very interesting, because when I first started working with Gatsby, this was quite a sort of light bulb moment for me, so to speak, which is how they deal with GraphQL. And I mentioned that Gatsby has GraphQL baked into it, which is really, really great. So to demonstrate that to you, let me just remove this test folder, and let's just work with an index page. Okay. So we have this index page here. You can stop this process now. So we have this index page, and what I'm going to do is go to Gatsbyconfig Js. So let's imagine that you're working on a site, and usually when you work on a site, you want to have something added to the title, something added to the footer. This is kind of, you could think of it as metadata, right? So the year the site was added, you know, some footnotes, the title of your site. These are all pieces of metadata that you want to add, not just to one page, but throughout your pages. So how can you make sure that first of all is centralized? What you can do is inside module.exports, because this is, you know, JavaScript, you can just create a new exporting property, and I just call that site metadata. You could call that whatever you want. And you could say title is going to be my title. You can say description, my site description. So, you know, you can add, you know, any sort of metadata that you want. And then website is, I don't know, google.com. Okay. What's going to be very interesting is that once you have this site metadata edit here, and of course, once you have Gatsby develop running again, so once you have this running, some of you may have noticed that when I was, you know, looking at localhost 8000, there was also this other thing, which is a GraphQL in-browser IDE that runs on localhost port 8000 / __ GraphQL. That's interesting. So let's, you know, let's take a look at that. So let's open localhost 8000 / __ GraphQL. And what you have here is a GraphQL explorer / editor. Okay, so for those of you not familiar with GraphQL, GraphQL is a query language for APIs. I do recommend that you take a look if you haven't heard about it. It's really convenient to use. And in this context, what it allows us to do is to explore, or we can explore the structure and the content behind our Express application, our Gatsby application. And if you have a Hawkeye, then you may have already noticed that we have two sections here. We have the all directory, all file, all site, etc., and then we have the file site, page site plugin. Okay, so we have access to all the site information. We have access to all the file information that we have. So like the total number of files, and I can just query for that, and it will give me 0. We don't have any additional files that we added. We can query for, you know, directories. We can filter for particular directories. We can you know, get the, I don't know, the extension of particular directories, and we can just run queries and then consume the data that Gatsby returns to us. Now, this is great, but now the question is, you know, I have this site metadata, and this is site build metadata, so that's not the same thing. So I have this site metadata. So the question is, how can I sort of extract that piece of information from Gatsby and from GraphQL, and then consume that inside my application? So the way that works is the following. I can go back to my app. So this is now saved, so that's good. And I can go to, say, index.js. And what I can do, I can import use static query and GraphQL from Gatsby. Okay. If I do that, I can basically run any GraphQL query inside any component that I create or that I want to use. So for example, let's say data, use static query. And there are two types of queries. There are static queries, and there are, of course, the dynamic queries. In here, I just want to query for the information that I put into the configuration file. Okay, so this is considered to be what they call a static query. And then I can specify my GraphQL query in between these backtick symbols. Okay, so where do I find this? What is the query that I want to run here? Well, I can come back to my Explorer here, and I can click on Site. If I click on Site, notice that I see this thing called the site metadata. And if I extend that, I have author, description, title, website. Now, if you paid attention, that rings a bell, and I can help you. Because if I go back to config, I have title, description, author, and website, which is exactly what I have here. So I'm going to check those. This is the query. I'm going to hit run. And here is the data that I want to use. So the query, I can just copy. And I'm just showing this. You could have edit the query directly in here without using that interface and just construct the query here. But I just wanted to show you how to easily discover what you can query for. And once you have the query, we can just utilize the data variable and have access to all of this information inside our React app now. So I'm going to say, instead of, we can leave hello world. I'm just going to say return. And then we can have like so. Okay, so I'm going to say hello world, and then I'm going to say this site was created by, and then I'm just going to say what I'm going to say. I need data is the variable, and I can just do very simple dot walking data.site metadata.author. So I can just do data dot, I forgot what it was, data.site metadata.author. Just hit save. And hopefully, if we go back to localhost 8000, there we go. We now have that data returned to us. Okay, so this is, to me, this was a really powerful thing because you can do a lot of additional things with this. And in fact, you will see that in the application that I built, you can actually also query for content files. So I can actually run a GraphQL query to query for markdown files and then consume that inside my application as well. So hopefully this gives you a very brief introduction to Gatsby. And let me close this and close this project. There's of course a lot that I could have talked to you about with regards to Gatsby, but this is just one of the key and most interesting things that I've seen. And what I'll do now is go ahead and show you the final project. Of course, slightly more complex. As you can see, there's in the sources folder, we have a couple of additional folders. We still have the pages folder, index and products. We have a components folder, but where you can create individual Gatsby React components, right? So if you follow component-based development, you can just create your components, your Lego bricks, so to speak, and then you can use those inside pages. So you can very easily, just import any of your building blocks inside these folders. And then on top of the Gatsby config file, we also have Gatsby browser and Gatsby node. Gatsby browser being a configuration that is relevant to the browser. I can show this to you, which is just importing the style sheet. Gatsby node is going to be a tad more complicated, but we're going to talk about that as well in a moment. But let me go ahead and Gatsby develop this. So let's see what this application is doing. And at a very high level, what this application is doing is, just more complex React stuff essentially. But there's still nothing really special about this app when it comes to these particular files. So I have a layout, as you can see. There's a footer, there's a header component, so that I have a sort of consistent view, and then I have on the pages 404 index.js and products. Okay, so index.js is going to be, of course, the main website. Products is going to list a bunch of products for us, and then you will see that in a moment. So it's building the development bundle. Let me open a new window. Go to localhost 8000 soon. Yep. Okay, and here it is. Okay, so this is, I think you don't see the footer, so let me bring it up here, like so. So this is our application essentially. So this information inside the footer, of course, comes from that config file via Graphql queries that I showed you, because this is, sort of static information here. And we have an index page, and then we have a link to products where I have a bunch of, products: 60s outfit, light jumper, poolside sunglasses. Notice I also have a shopping cart, which is empty, and, there's £0 there. So let's go to the poolside sunglass product page. Maybe that's too much zoom. I can take it as a product, as a product description, and I can go and add this to the cart. It is now added to my cart. So if I say continue shopping, then my shopping cart updates. So I go back to products and I pick a light jumper as well. Then now I have 2 items in my shopping cart. That again updates. And I can now, once I'm happy, I can go and check out and go through this checkout flow and purchase, essentially purchase these items. So how does this work? So let's start from the beginning. Where do I get these products from? I guess that's a valid question to ask. Notice that I have a folder here called content. Let me just close this one. We have a content folder. Inside the content folder, I have a products folder, and inside these, I have various markdown files. Classic flip-flop, light jumper, poolside sunglass. Okay, and if I open this, what I see here is the metadata for the markdown file, also called as a YAML from metadata. And then I just have markdown content in here. So in fact, what I'm doing is I'm storing the product information inside markdown files. That's it, right? And just to prove this to you, best shades ever. Save this. And if I come here, this automatically updates. So the product info, so the product description that you see here is in fact coming just from markdown files. So how is that possible? First of all, if I go to Gatsby config, there is this thing called the Gatsby Transformer remark. And for those of you who are not familiar with remark.js, it's basically a sort of library that transforms Markdown into HTML. Okay, so I'm using that along with the Gatsby source file system plugin to specify where my content is to be able to read content. And how do I read content? If I go to the products.js file, at the bottom here, I run a GraphQL query. And I am basically querying for all the markdown files that I see, including the front meta template. So in fact, let me go to the GraphQL editor. and that you can see what I'm talking about if we do the Explorer. Okay, so we have all markdown remark, edges, nodes from Meta, and I can ask for all the name and price of my products. And I see that because the combination of the Gatsby source file system and the Gatsby Transformer remark plugins, I can access the content that I have in Markdown files, and I can query for those. And in fact, there's also this HTML thing option. And what this will allow me to do is to take a look at the HTML version of my Markdown file. And that's pretty much it, right? All I do is I execute this GraphQL statement here. I call that, a page query. You could call this, product query or whatever you want. And then I extract the products and I iterate through the products inside this products.js file. Okay, and I build up the sort of div, the sort of boxes, including some tables to display the name and the price of the particular product. So this is exactly what you see here: the image of the product, the name of the product, and the price of the product. Now comes the tricky bit. What happens if I click on one of these products, like this flip-flop, right? This is now a product page. It has its own, I'm not sure whether this is actually going to zoom in for you, but you see that there's a unique URL for it, which is /product/classics-flip-flop. How does that work? Now, this is a bit tricky because what happens when you run Gatsby build is Gatsby is going to take all this information that you put in the various components and various JavaScript files and generate static pages for you. And it's going to put that in a public folder. And in fact, if I do, let me run this for you and then you will see what I mean. Gatsby build. So Gatsby build is a process that we refer to as pre-rendering markup. This is now going to build all the static pages and all the JavaScript and all the CSS that we need in order to have a sort of production-ready application. Okay, in the case of Gatsby, it puts everything into this public folder. For other static site generators, they may use a dist folder, they may use an underscore dist folder. There's a bunch of different folders that they would be using. Okay, so under public, we have a bunch of files, and we also have a products folder. Inside the products folder, there's an index.html file. And if you open this, and I do apologize, I forgot to sort of remove the unused CSS classes, so that's why it's a massive file with all the CSS in it. But hopefully you can see that we have light jumper for £34. The classic British flip-flops for £19. Okay, so we have all these products and all the information of the products inside a static index HTML file. So Gatsby has created for us. I could just literally copy this entire file, go to something like a jsbin.com, paste it into the HTML section, and I still get that full-blown information right here, which is the product listing, right? Because it's just static content, right? Everything was added to that page at the build time. So there's, I don't need a server to see the output, okay? All I need is the HTML, and here it is. Everything about that site is right here. Now, why did I tell you this? Because this is great for, products, but clearly I have, in this case, I have 4 products. But what if I have 5,000 products? do I need to sort of individually create 5,000 products pages? Or how is this going to work? How does Gatsby know that if I click on Light Jumper, it should bring up this products Light Jumper page? Because if you take a look at here, it actually auto-generated a page for the individual product as well. So there's an index.html for the flip-flops, and I could take that again, go to JS, Code Sandbox or any sort of website, paste it, I still see the product here, right? That's it. It just works. The question is, how does Gatsby know to create all of these? And you can actually programmatically tell Gatsby via this template what to do. Okay, you can provide it with a template that you can then apply to every single product. So basically, Gatsby, you tell Gatsby that, hey, I have this product page, the individual product page. This is how it looks like. Okay, there's some additional stuff in here, but this is how it looks like. Every time you run, and this also in here, apply this template, this JavaScript template file to these markdown files, and as part of your build process, create a single HTML page for every single product that you find. Okay, so now statically it generated 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I now add the new product, and let's just quickly do that. So if I do copy this, what is this? Products, test-product.md. I'm just going to give it a new ID. I'm going to say this is a test workshop product. Price should be 33. Product description, blah, blah. Okay, I'm just going to save this. I'm going to run Gatsby build again. I'm sorry, Gatsby build. If I run Gatsby build again, because I told it what template to use, it's going to generate a static page for this product as well, completely automatically. And you will see that inside the public folder, this is the place we need to take a look at. It just added a test product as well. Okay, it's right there. So it just automatically adds that for us. Okay, so a few interesting things. And let's do Gatsby develop. And I realize I have about 15 minutes, so I need to wrap it up soon. We don't need this. We don't need GraphQL, and we will need main page, which is being built. Come on. Okay, so if I go to product, now I have the test workshop product listed, of course, right? So see there are images here as well. So here's this particular image. And these images are served via Cloudinary. And you're probably thinking, why are you doing that? Well, let me show you why you should use Cloudinary. And I'm going to use this particular picture for demonstration purposes. Let me just zoom in a bit here. So this image, someone took this image, or we want to use this image, we uploaded it to Cloudinary, and if you do that, you get an access URL that looks like this. Okay, something, your Cloudinary username, image upload, name of the file with extension. Okay, so it's woman.jpg. And if I just refresh real quick here, you can see that this image why can't I get rid of that? Anyway, so this image, where is this image? Is 583 kilobytes in size. Okay, that is because this image is 1000 pixels by 688. And this image is in fact a JPEG image. Now, the problem that most developers do is that they use all these images And then they use CSS to shrink down the dimension of the image, which is not necessarily a good thing to do. So there's a lot of things that we can do to optimize this image. First of all, if you work with images and videos as well in general, there are a lot of image formats available. So there's JPEG, there's PNG, there's WebP, there's JPEG 2000, there's JPEG XL, and others. Basically, different browser vendors work with different image formats or can work with different image formats. So for example, WebP is an image format that Google created, and they say if you want to have a really optimized image, you want to serve really optimized images, then if you're using Chrome, please serve WebP. Then you try to open a WebP image in Safari and it says, I don't know what this is, and it just offers it up for downloading. But they say you want to optimize your images, the most optimal format that you would send to a Safari browser is JPEG 2000. It's not just JPEG, it's a subversion of JPEG, which is JPEG 2000. So there's all these different image formats, all these different browsers. And if you want to truly give your users a good optimized image experience, you would have to create all these media assets, figure out the logic to serve those to the right browser, to the right people, and then just benefit from that. Now, what you can do with Cloudinary is just add f_auto to the URL, which is going to pick the right format based on the browser that you're using to access the image. So I'm just going to hit enter. And notice that the size of this particular file went down to 49 kilobytes, from 583 to just 49. Why? Because if you take a look at the content type header, which I'm sorry, I don't think you can see, the content type header, it is in fact being served as a WebP. Now, if I take the same image, the same URL, I'm not changing the URL, I'm just copy pasting it. I open up a Safari window, go to the network panel in Safari, and take a look at the content type header. The content type is image JP2, which is JPEG 2000. So automatically, Cloudinary serves the right image format for the right browser based on the request. And we can do additional things. So in this image, there are lots of additional pixels that we don't need. And we can auto-optimize the quality of this image with Q_auto. So Q_auto is going to reduce the quality of the image in a way that is not visible to the human eye. So now we went to just 32 kilobytes, so 580 to 49 to 32. And frankly, I don't think we need this image to be 1000 pixels in width, so we can specify a W parameter, and we can say 200 is going to, on the server side, render an image that is 200 by 138, so where the width is 200. This is it, and this image is now 2.9 kilobytes only, okay? Doing this in CSS, first of all, you can shrink the image in CSS, but the browser will still download this full-blown image. This is a much better optimized image that now will be a WebP in Chrome, a JPEG 2000 in Safari, etc., etc. There are additional things that we can do. So let me just show you one more thing. So I can do height of 200 as well, which will, of course, sort of create this skewed image. But I can tell it to create a thumbnail for me, which is cropping the thumbnail and finding the face, and it will basically find the face of this person and put it in the middle of the image. And what we've achieved now is a 5 kilobyte profile image, which is auto-optimized, has automatic formats, and yeah, it's not 500 kilobytes, but just 5. Now, why is this relevant? Because every single image that I have here is optimized. So if I open this in Safari, these are going to be JPEG 2000s. If I open them in Chrome, they are going to be WebPs. And Cloudinary does a lot of additional things. So if I click on this particular image, notice I have a color picker, which is really just a component that I created called color select, right? So these are the colors that you see listed right here. So this image, you can copy, is just an image that we uploaded to Cloudinary. This is how it looks like. Now, when you have a product and you think about e-commerce for a second, if you have a product that looks like this, you would usually serve or try to sell it with different colors. So you have teal, indigo, blue, red, yellow, etc., etc. But would you like to take a picture of every single color combination, or would you use Cloudinary to do color replacement? And yes, you heard me right, you can do color replacement. So I can say, let's take a look at this in indigo. I'm just going to replace the original color of the jumper with indigo, or with blue, or with red, or with yellow. Now, if you think that these are actually pre-made images, I can just copy this. And if you take a look at the URL, you will see that there's this color replacement parameter here, which says, take this color and replace it with this color. And that's exactly what happens. This is truly dynamic and on the fly. And to further prove my point, I can go ahead and just create another entry inside this color component. I'm just going to, I don't know what color this is going to be. I'm just going to hit save. So that's why I said unknown color. Okay, so this is the color that I kind of generated. So if I click on this, you see, this is now also being picked up. And if I change this to say, God, I'm really bad at this. So see BE6511. I don't know what colors I'm. Okay, this is now brown. Okay, so if I click on this, then that gets generated. So this is truly on the fly at all times. Let me also talk about snip cart. So we added these two products to our cart, and I can now do checkout. And notice that I have billing, which is the first sort of section. And if I continue to payment, there's going to be payment. But what if I want to change this? And for that, I need to go and log into Snipcart. Real quick here. I thought I was signed in, but I wasn't. Let me just sign in real quick. And this is the Snipcart dashboard that I have. And I have the store configuration here where I can specify a payment gateway. So I can enable, Stripe, PayPal, any payment providers. I have shipping, and shipping is currently disabled. So I'm going to just say shipping should be on. And I can set up custom shipping method. I can integrate with FedEx, USPS, UPS, any sort of shipping provider. And what I can do now is just that I just enabled shipping, go back to my app, refresh this checkout page. Billing was there. And now it got a new step got added, which is shipping. I didn't have to touch any of my code. All I did was to go into a centralized location and change something in there. Okay, so hopefully with these two examples, with Cloudinary and with Snipcart, you sort of understand the power of the Jamstack, like how dynamically you can just change stuff around and let these providers worry about the implementation details, right? And of course, you're probably thinking, how do I deploy this? That's the last step, and I have about 5 minutes to show that to you, which should be just enough. So there's another provider that we can talk about, which is Netlify. I'm just going to log into my Netlify account. As you can see, I have lots of things in here, lots of deployments, but let's create a new site from Git. Okay, which means that in order for us to be able to add this particular project, it needs to be added to GitHub. So I'm just going to do a git commit, push all the changes that I've done. I don't even know what those were, but let's just add those. So now, this is a development workflow. We have, I forgot to add the new product. Okay, we have just finished the project, right? It's ready. We tested it and we're ready to deploy. Now, what I can do, so this project is already on GitHub, right, in this particular repository. So what I can do, I can hook up Netlify with my GitHub account. First time you do this, you need to authorize, and it will see some of your repositories. And this particular repository is already there. So this is the repository. You click there and you tell it which branch you want to deploy. And by default, Netlify will know that this is a Gatsby project. So in order to create a static site, it needs Gatsby build. And what it needs to publish from is the public folder. Show advanced, you can add, any sort of environment variables that you want here. And I'm just going to say deploy site. And what's going to happen, we get this unique sort of URL for the site, and there is going to be a deployment that's going to happen right here. Okay, so this is going to take about a minute or two. Essentially, Netlify is now going to git clone our repository. It's going to install its own system stuff. It's going to install all the dependencies that we have specified. And it's going to, as a last step, is going to run the Gatsby build command, which is then going to generate the static pages for us. Once it's done, it will make the site available for us. So we will have a site that we have just deployed. Okay, so this is going to take roughly a minute or two. While this is happening, let me go back to my slides and just show you something else. Now, the question is, where are my slides? Right here. Okay. So I promised that I would show you some resources, and I will make sure that you receive these slides one way or another, so you can actually click on these. But I just linked to stuff like the Cloudin resource, Cloudin documentation, the Snipcard documentation, and the Netlify documentation as well, so that you can see how this works. What I didn't link to, and I do apologize, is the Gatsby docs themselves. I'm sorry, I forgot that. So let me just add that for you as well. The Gatsby docs, right? So this is going to be a link to the Gatsby docs. Cool. There's also an article which is introduction to the Jamstack. So if you want to go through the basics, you can read that article. And I also promised a resource for training, which is, or a video course, which is jamstack.training. Okay, so if I go to jamstack.training, this website currently has 10 free video courses about various applications surrounding the Jamstack. And one particular one is called Create an E-commerce app with Gatsby. And this, in fact, is the course that covers the project that I showed you now. But as you can see, it's probably like 2 or 3 hours long. You can pause it. You can take a look at it anytime you want. So all the stuff that you need to know about this particular project is available in this course for free. Create an e-commerce app with Gatsby, which is available on jamstack.training, right? So jamstack.training is the website that you should be looking for. Okay, so if I could take a couple of more minutes, let me just see how the deployment is going. Okay, so this is, something is happening. Okay, fetching packages. Okay, so it started to actually install, our project dependencies. Okay, so if you can bear with me for sort of 5 more minutes, then I'm going to show you why these deployment platforms are also a great fit for the Jamstack. Okay, so it's going to deploy everything. It will also actually execute the Gatsby develop command, which you will be able to track in this, what they call the deploy log, right? So this is under deploys, there's this log where I can take a look at the current deploy. So you can see it's, installing all these packages. Normally this auto uploads, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Like I have to click on this every time to get latest versions. Okay, Netlify build, and at some point, there we go, it says Gatsby build. So this is the user command. This is exactly the same stuff that you saw in my CLI to be executed. And if everything is successful, it's going to say something like, creating, what was it, production JavaScript and CSS bundles. Once it's done with that, it is, our site is going to be deployed. And Netlify gives a message that says something like, site is live. Okay, and site is live, which means if we now go to this URL that we received, we now have our application right here, okay, deployed. So what if, let's make a quick change, okay? So let's make, we messed up this color, so let's do 44DD11. So this is now new unknown color. Let's save. And, while you develop stuff, you do a commit and a git push, okay? And then, your changes are now saved to Git. What Netlify does is it constantly looks for your GitHub master branch. And if it sees that you've pushed a new change, it will create a new build. As you can see, there's a new build, and this is my commit message that I just added. So it's going to, this is going to be slightly faster because it doesn't need to install all the dependencies again. So this is going to be a deploy that is going to hopefully happen soon. But what's going to happen is that at the end of the day, this particular site is going to be automatically updated for you. You don't need to worry about anything. They're going to invalidate the old cache. They're going to update the new cache. They're going to push all the site, your entire site, to their CDNs automatically. Okay. And what you can do here as well is, if I go to the site overview, so this is my site. Notice I have domain settings, and I could just now say, okay, I actually don't like this domain. I'm going to redirect this to mystore.com, for example. So you can assign this to a domain, and then when people go to mystore.com, they will in fact see this Netlify site, which behind the scenes runs Gatsby, Snipcart, Cloudinary, and all these other things that you have seen. Okay, and that is the true power of the Jamstack. Now, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't have time to get into. So this is now, running Gatsby build. But believe it or not, once this is published, then we can see that the old version is still published because this is still building. At some point in time, probably in the next 15 seconds or so, this is going to switch. So basically, this new build is going to be published, and the old one is just going to be still there, sort of waiting. And believe it or not, you can very easily, so this is nearly finished, you can very easily switch in between the deployments. And that's the last thing that I'm going to show you before I wrap up. So I just need to wait for this to complete the build. Deploy, site is live. Okay, so if I come here, refresh this page, you see now the unknown color is a green color because we just updated this. But then you realize, you know what? We made a mistake. This is not what we wanted. So this is now published. I can just go to the previous build or any previous build that I have, and I can just say, you know what, publish this instead. And now if I go back here, we are now back to this brown color for the color selector, right? So this is just to indicate to you that we can switch in between builds and everything is done automatically for us. Okay, so as I said, if you want to dig deeper, do take a look at jamstack.training. The entire course is available there. And with that, thank you very much for your attention. I think that means mashallah and shukran, if I'm not mistaken. I sincerely hope that that's what it says, which is just, I wanted to be grateful to be able to do this presentation for you, and then thank you, of course, for attending it. As I said, any questions, you can reach me on Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me any point in time, and I hope you enjoyed this workshop as much as I enjoyed delivering this to you. Thank you.